it's amazing how much waste and cost and expense gets layered onto it. And a lot of it's just funny money, and people are just left scratching their heads.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. Every episode, we bring in business owners who are real business owners dealing with real things, growing real businesses, wrestling with real challenges. And today, I have the pleasure of introducing Christopher Habig. Christopher is CEO and co-founder of a business called Freedom Healthworks, which is a new innovative way to help patients get better care. And I'm going to let him say more about it. Let me introduce Christopher. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brett. It's a pleasure to be here. At Freedom Healthworks, what we are is a national platform for independent physicians who have kicked insurance companies and really government third-party programs and payers to the curb. And so they get to see patients free of all the constraints of red tape and bureaucracy. And patients get to join a physician's practice. About $100 a month cash, get to pay for medical services with dollars and cents, which increases access and actually decreases the cost of healthcare all around.
Which is a great concept. I love that there are new ways cropping up to try to fix what has been a terrible system, at least from the patient standpoint. For years and years, it's been awful. I know doctors are frustrated with insurance companies, and you guys are creating a way for doctors and patients to get together and just get care and pay for care directly, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. It just kind of born out of frustration, and I don't think anybody's super happy with the way that the healthcare industry has gone. And most of us expect a really negative experience when we are sick or we make that decision of, hey, I'm not getting better. I'm now going to go see a doctor. It's kind of we call our doctor at the last resort, many of us, and so we want to flip that narrative and enable physicians to have a much more proactive care philosophy and a much closer relationship with their patients than what the really mass quantity kind of a assembly line approach to medicine dictates in this modern day and age in the US.
I'm super curious. I don't want to derail our conversation or the focus of our podcast, but I am curious to hear one more answer from you with respect to what you guys are creating. I think about as a parent, I have several children. Um, I would love a model like you're describing where I just pay the doctor directly and I don't have to deal with insurance companies. But I'm left to wonder, what if something big happens, right? Like, do I still need to have some sort of safety net around an unexpected illness that could just put me out completely?
It's probably a good idea to have some type of health plan or a catastrophic or a major medical plan in place, and I kind of liken it to homeowners insurance. If you're a homeowner, it's a good idea to have an insurance policy that covers the big stuff, but you're not going to be calling your insurance company if you spill dinner on the floor or if you've got a leaky toilet or you need to repaint the house. But those are all things that we're filing insurance claims for on the medical side of it, which
Mm.
drives the cost up for it. Very few dollars actually make it back to the physician. A lot of that is just tied up in the bureaucratic red tape, like I talked about, or in the administration fees and all this kind of stuff. There's a ton of people that have their hands in the pie for an industry that is a fifth of our country's economy, but is really only focused between the interaction of one patient and one doctor. It's amazing how much waste and cost and expense gets layered onto it. And a lot of it's just funny money, and people are just left scratching their heads. And there's just not a lot of people out there willing to fix it because they're making so much darn money that there's no incentive to actually go through and try to rewrite the rules. And so we're partnering with physicians who are tired of it. They want to get back to kind of the grassroots, kind of um, the local flavor of practicing medicine and taking care of families that really care about their health.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you for entertaining me there. Not entertaining me, for allowing me that opportunity to learn more. I've genuinely am interested in what you're talking about. Okay, let's
I,
get
I
to the
will
heart
say,
of. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I will say, Brett, just to add on to it, that that doesn't mean by its health insurance by default. There are a lot of really interesting health plans out there that might be insurance alternatives that people are starting to look for, that people can save a ton of money by doing it because, there's some of these plans that if you're unhealthy and you're smoking 5 packs of cigarettes a day or you're not exercising, they're going to ask you to pay a little bit more because your risk of something bad happening in your health is higher. It's this novel concept of really risk adjusted financial tools that insurance should be.
Yeah, good point. Insurance should be that. All right, there we go. Chris, let's jump into the meat of our interview today. And as you know, there are two parts. First part, you just get to be the star of the show and share some key lessons that you've learned in the growth of your business. And then we'll shift gears at some point, and you can share a challenge, an opportunity, a puzzle that you're working on that I could be helpful with. And in both cases, we want to help our listeners deal with the things that they're going through. So, why don't we start with key lessons that you've learned in the growth of your business that might be helpful to other business owners?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start with a little bit of storytelling, and I think any entrepreneur recognizes some problem or opportunity out there. And I've always been a big fan of resorting to practical solutions. I don't run to, hey, I need to design a new app or new technology or whatever it is. I like to see like, can we get an idea that solves an actual real world problem, and then how do we assemble a team behind it that believes in this just as much as I do and just as much as your founding team does. And I think that's imperative that a lot of people will run out and say, hey, I have this new idea for an app and I need to go get funding. And we kind of went the other way. And I'm one of those people that says, for a lot of a lot of entrepreneurs out there, you don't need investors. What you need is customers. You don't need investment, you need revenue. And without revenue, why would anybody go out and invest in it? So we started this company, a long time ago, it feels like. But we wanted to solve a problem, and that was how do you actually access a trusted physician in this day and age without having to wait 3 weeks for an appointment or getting called back 3 days later after you needed the doctor. Like there's a lot of people who are hurting. There's a lot of heartbreak in healthcare right now. And on the flip side, there's a lot of physicians that want to do the right thing. The vast majority of physicians didn't go to medical school in order to be very well paid data clerks. And that's what we're treating them like these days in most hospitals. And so we had a couple cold beers one day, and we said, you know what, this is nuts. My parents were physicians, and kind of seeing, growing up in a hospital and growing up in a doctor's office, just kind of seeing what they went through. Um, then I decided not to go to medical school and follow in their footsteps because they discouraged it, big time from that. But we sat down and had a couple of beers and got creative and just said, why is healthcare so hard to innovate in as an industry? And we ended up boiling it down to two words: insurance and government. And then we drew a big Ghostbusters logo through it and said, all right, how do we design a business model that gets around these two barriers to innovation in healthcare? And so we kind of went on a road tour, a listening tour, if you would, to try to gather as much market research as we possibly could. We did that for about a year and a half, Brett, and we just listened. And I think that's another big tip that I would give to people out there, that when they have these ideas, you got to see what, if anything exists, and then you got to listen to what people are actually doing and saying and talking about. Because we would have had a much different business model early if we didn't do the listening tour than we ended up coming out with later on. And we even took some missteps there. And, we launched our first practice and did business with our first doctor back in 2016. And we were charging, kind of usage fees. And we found out that that was a bad idea later on. It's put everything you possibly can underneath a membership, make it super easy to buy, and people will come flocking. And so we took that same model and we started really proliferating around the country. And then we found ourselves in that kind of growth stage where we're saying, okay, we can't do anything. We can't do everything ourselves. We can't do it, two or three people at a time. It's tough to do everything with a national growth strategy. And so it came into hiring. And, I guess luckily for us that there's a lot of frustration and anger in people who worked in healthcare, not just doctors, but operations managers and people like that who wanted to come and kind of burn it all down and say we've got to reset this entire thing. And so we found a lot of good ones that were able to do that, and not everybody worked out, unfortunately. But being able to continue to grow and have turnover even at early stages is a very hard thing to do. So we just kept at it. There's been really good days and there's been really bad days, and that's kind of the life and the cycle of the entrepreneur. But um, we've persisted, and I think that's what really separates us. That we saw a lot of the hard days and say, all right, how do we think critically? How do we think creatively, and be able to push out of this what's not going well, and how do we fix it? How do we get the word out there that it is okay for the business of medicine to revamp itself and rethink itself. And it's pretty amazing just the conversations you get invited to, and who's on the other side of your phone when you try to tackle large problems with innovative solutions.
That is pretty amazing. You started sharing that for those out there who have big ideas, or let's call them just ideas. You don't even have to say they're big ideas. Have ideas that they want to try, and they're excited about it, and then they go, "Let's let me get some backers. We'll get some investment, and we'll start pouring into this." And then you said, well, you gave your opinion, which I agree with, that we should actually be solving real problems that the market's willing to pay for. And so let's do that. Let's get revenue coming in that shows us the merit of our idea. But then you went to this listening tour concept for a year and a half, and it I don't know that you meant to put it in that sequence, but it sounds to me like did a bunch of listening first so that then you could put something out in the market that people would be willing to pay for. And you learned a bunch of stuff along the way. Um, but now you have a market driven offering that people are paying for, and you don't have to go out and validate your idea with investment dollars. You validate it with market dollars. And then if you need to pour some fuel on to grow faster, nothing wrong with getting some outside funding for accelerated growth. But let's not jump right to that source when it's time to testing ideas. And I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sequence event, um, I did put that out there intentionally, that we have ideas, and I filled notebooks up with these ideas. And going into business school, they're all talking about, I was in business school and almost like 10 years ago in 2014, and it was all about, hey, you've got this idea, like let's go get investors, let's see if we can get backing. And it just never sat well with me. And so we had these ideas, and we say, great, the first thing you should do is go to Google and see if there's anybody else doing it, because there might be somebody who's doing it, and maybe you can join them, or talk to them. And most startups are more than happy to lend you some time, just to chat with them. But we did. We had this idea of, what if you could go and pay a doctor with cash? Just walk in and say, just like a gym membership, I could go to the gym every single day, or I could go once a month. One's probably better than the other, but there's probably a happy medium in there. And my price doesn't change. Why can't we make a recurring subscription based business model for healthcare services? And so instead of going out and saying, all right, investors, here's what I want to do, I have no idea if anybody in the country is actually doing this or not. That's where we went out and did the listening tour to say, holy cow, this is actually real. And there's doctors around the country, a handful of them, that are doing things kind of their own way. Some were just doing hourly, some were doing retainer, some were just doing, more of a really elite level, high dollar, $10,000 a month, and then you can call me anytime you want to. And so we tried to find the right type of business model, and then we were going to go raise money on that one, because we're like, look, this is a real thing, people are doing this. And we were fortunate enough to find some customers who wanted to believe in us. And even to this day, we've been completely internally funded. And we've talked to some people who are friendly from the cash side of it, and it's sexy as hell, and it's very alluring to say, it's very tempting to say, oh gosh, look at all these dollars over here, but what am I going to give up? And do I feel like the company is ready to bring on that outsized capital, or do I still have more runway and until I'm at more of a peak valuation, and then I can capitalize on all my hard work?
Yep, yep. Great stuff. Okay. Thank you for sharing those lessons that you've learned over the past several years. I think very valuable insights that you shared. Let's shift gears at this point in our conversation and talk about what's ahead of you as you guys look forward at Freedom Healthworks and where you're trying to take it. What has you I don't know, puzzling? What has you wrestling? What kinds of issues are you dealing with right now that I might be able to add some insight to?
I think in a lot of people's minds, you have this idea and you're like, oh my gosh, it's working. I can just do where's my hockey stick moment? And from our standpoint, there's a lot of stuff we want to do. And so it becomes more of a focus standpoint and making sure that our team, as it grows, we got the best people on as we possibly can. But how do we make sure that we are aligned in asking them what to do and follow through with, and not just having that whiplash back and forth of chasing potential market opportunities to ground to see if things are real or not? And I think that's where I get caught, just as a leader, of saying, "Wow, this would be a really cool opportunity. Let's see if there's anything there." Versus, let's focus and let's make sure the core business is healthy and alive and well before we then add something on. So, if I boil it down there, it's getting focus from leadership, and then aligning that, kind of your marching orders, or aligning your mission and vision with your team to get them all going in the same direction. And then the third kind of caveat is that while preserving the flexibility and kind of the experimentation that is so near and dear to the entrepreneur, and so near and dear to the startup life.
Yeah, I think you teed that up very well, and an issue that many business owners wrestle with. So let's talk first for you, Chris, about what does it mean to your business if the lack of if you have lack of focus, or you get excited about an idea that might pull people away from the main thing and jeopardize the ability to move those goals forward. Like what does that cost your business? What does that mean to you guys? Like why is this a big deal?
Yeah, it's a new industry that we're in too. So, people think healthcare is so stodgy and it's just there and it's broken and there's just not. We kind of view it the other way. Like, what we're doing is kind of the Wild West. And so it's a lot of like service design. How do we design something that our team can actually perform on? Who do we need on the bench to be able to do this without pulling away from, what their skill set is? And so, that's how I'm going to answer that question: is how do we continue to innovate and get things in there from a market fit standpoint without just racking up headcount and, running a smart business without just cratering things, chasing an idea?
Okay, so I just want to push this point a little bit further before we jump into ideas. Okay, you use the term like cratering. um, like what is the potential cost of having the distraction, not being clear, not staying focused? Like what can happen to your business?
Yeah, you go sideways. You
You
go,
go sideways.
you lose your brand equity that you strive for. Your quality decreases. A lot of bad
Yeah,
things could happen.
a lot of bad things,
That
right?
take,
And
yeah,
the reason I sit in this for a minute is because I want people listening to pay attention to the risk because we're all inclined to do this. We're like we have something that's working, it's going well, but then we see another opportunity or multiple opportunities, and we're like, that seems like a good idea to go do some of these other things. But by diverting scarce resources to something else, we can actually put at risk the whole thing. It can go sideways. And so I'm not, I don't like to deal in paranoia, right? Like I'm not about, you know, um, freaking people out or saying, don't ever try something new. Entrepreneurs need to innovate. They need to take ideas to market and create and grow. I feel like that's an amazing thing that they bring to the world. And we still can put our relatively young business at risk if we're not careful about how we do this balancing act between exceptional operation of the current thing while we put enough resource on developing new things or creating the future, right? Like there is a balancing act there, and it's not a 50-50 play. I think it's more like a good 80% is driving on the current machine. Like, let's make sure we don't lose that. It's working. Let's make sure that we hit our goals with that. And then what other about 20% of our collective time, energy, resources can we put towards future building things? And that might be capabilities that strengthen the current machine, and it might be a new thing altogether, but let's not take our eye off the ball on the main thing. So how do we do that? Let's get really practical with this, Chris. Um, I imagine so. Give us an idea of about how many team members you have today.
About 15.
Okay, about 15. As soon as you cross over that 6, 8, 10 employee mark, it's like no more just the business owner or the co-founders with everybody else as a direct report. Usually, it starts to break up a little bit. We start to get a little bit of leadership structure. As a co-founder, that implies there's another co-founder. So maybe if there's a couple of you in those key leadership roles, you can handle 15 people between the two of you. But the picture I'm trying to paint is, as the team grows, the complexity in the organization starts to increase. It takes more and more to get targeted, coordinated effort, right? The businesses that win get really clear on what the destination is, and then they pull all the time, energy, resources together in alignment, and they run towards that as efficiently as they can, right? Those are the ones that do the best. So we have to build in some processes in our growing business that keeps us focused, that targeted, coordinated action on the main thing that keeps that thing going well, and then that peels off sufficient improvement, innovation, future oriented efforts. We got to do those things kind of simultaneously. And my favorite tool or lever for that is a good meeting rhythm. This is not new. It's not rocket science, but let me explain it in a way that I hope does help people see it as clearly as possible. People hear of annual planning, quarterly planning. Are you doing that sort of thing today, Chris? Annual planning, quarterly planning with the team? You get people involved and say, where are we going? Yes, I see your head
Yeah,
shaking.
yeah, yeah. A lot of it revolves around budgetary
Okay, yeah, yeah.
planning. Yeah.
Yep, there's financial and operational planning that goes, but there should be some future focused. We've got a bigger mission that we're up to. We have strategies towards that mission, and so this year's annual priorities outside of the operational excellence we must maintain with the current thing that we've built. The annual priorities, quarterly priorities to move the business forward, and we want to be more strategic in those annual and quarterly meetings, and we get a little bit more or a lot more operationally focused in our weekly dashboard check-in, weekly meeting type of stuff, right? So teams come together weekly to stay targeted, coordinated action on the operations, and then annual is all strategic. Quarterly, I would propose, is all strategic, and then there's a meeting that I want to talk about that most businesses neglect or ignore, or maybe they don't know that it should be there. There should be a monthly meeting that is the bridge between strategic and operational, and I call it a monthly leadership meeting. You can call it whatever you want, but it bridges strategy and execution, and we're really good on execution, and when we go off site we're really good on strategic, but it's hard to keep our eye on both of those balls. And a monthly meeting to check in about, and I'm talking about like half a day, like I'm talking about a sizable chunk of time on the months where you don't have a quarterly. So let's say you do your quarterlies the third month of every quarter. I would be looking for a monthly meeting in January and February, and then like a planning meeting in March for the next quarter, right? And we just continue that process. So in the monthly meetings, we're checking in on what we said was essential to move the business forward for the future, and then we're also checking in on any of the bigger operational things that bubble up that we can't ever quite tackle in a weekly dashboard or team meeting. So we get a little combination of bigger operational things, and then check in on strategic progress. And that monthly meeting is essential for those two things to happen. Otherwise, you get like the lone, co-founder or CEO who's trying to move strategic priorities forward, but the rest of the team is not coming along. And we just need check-ins against that stuff periodically. And we need the right amount of attention and focus without diluting too much the energy and effort going towards the main thing. So let me pause on that. I think a really good meeting rhythm is essential, and any business is trying to spend enough time in the business and on the business, and bringing the team together, a growing team together in a targeted, coordinated way.
Absolutely. I love that idea. And, the one question coming back at you is, in a hybrid work environment that is prevalent these days, like that's
Yes.
always the fun start. It's always the give or take of, all right, is this a virtual meeting, or are we going to be doing this in person? And then getting people in there. We have a good team, so I hear some horror stories out there, but I think any business owner trying to navigate that um, hybrid office environment, taking what you just said, which I love, and then putting it into practicality without distractions, that becomes another big question from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah, great follow-up question. I would say where possible, and I know it's not possible for every team out there. Where possible, I like to have that team together on the quarterly planning basis. Um, and maybe two times a year is all we can get together, or maybe one time a year. At a minimum, one time a year, even better twice a year, and where possible, once a quarter. That seems to really help us stay focused on the things that we have to do to meet today's business needs, and be talking enough about where we're trying to go at the same time. What I like about involving the team, it's one thing for you and your co-founder to get together and get perfectly aligned on the future vision of the business. It's an entirely different thing to get the whole team to understand that and pull towards that together. So, where possible, we advocate a co-created future with the team. So it's not just a communication motion to the team, but it's a, hey, we're going to do some planning. We want to get your thoughts and ideas. That enrolls them at a level that is really hard to get when you're just like cascading information to them. So it is more investment. Certainly, if you try to get everybody together once a quarter, that's significantly more investment. But and when you get past 10 or 12, I mean, you guys are already past that point. It really is hard to do planning with the whole team. And so what that looks like is, let's get input from, maybe you have a 2-hour input meeting with the whole team virtually, and you take them through some exercises that gets their unique perspective on things that should shape the thinking of the leadership team about where this business can or should go, but maybe they're not involved in the full planning meeting. So I've seen that very effectively done over a couple hours of a virtual meeting, where we're going through things like what we accomplished last quarter, lessons that we learned, traditional SWOT exercise, right? We're just sort of bringing all of our ideas to the table in a way that the leadership team can now take that collective perspective, finish up the planning, then come back and say, hey, we took all the input. We were all there together. You gave amazing input. Here's where we took it. Here's our draft. This is draft form because we need your thoughts. We need you to poke holes, so you can come back with a draft and have them weigh in on that. But then they feel connected to that future creation, and this is important, Chris, and they don't allow you to go off in tangents when you've invited them into the planning, because they say, Chris, we all agreed to this, and now you're ready to take us that direction. And you say, yeah, but this is important because, and they'll say, but remember, we all decided this because of these reasons. And it doesn't mean you're totally handcuffed, Chris. You can still change direction of the business or do something exciting that you want to do, but at least you'll have some checks and balances built into the team, because they were involved in those conversations. They heard you say it's important that we stay focused on this. And so the next time you come up with something else and say, that's a great idea, Chris, next time in our planning meeting, let's discuss it. But for now, we're going to stay focused on the thing that we all said was the thing. So anyway, those are a few thoughts. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that last point, I think that's going to make any business owner, entrepreneur kind of squirm a little bit because you're
A
always in
little
a
bit,
race,
yeah.
right? Like, how can we go faster? How can we find an opportunity and be the first one there, or go big in there? But I totally understand what you're saying. And also, I just want to throw this out there that, from an alignment standpoint, I totally agree too, because I think everybody has seen an example where you say something and then as it trickles down it's a game of telephone, and so to have everybody there with it documented, makes a ton of sense to be able to say, like, no, this is what was said, this is what we said. So it kind of goes both ways from a leadership and then from an execution standpoint too. So I'm right there with you.
Well, in those, we'll call them 90-day sprints, right? I mean, quarterly planning is a subset of annual priorities. Like we got to get clear for the year. What are the top two or three move the business forward types of priorities? We still got to do the day to day, get and serve our members, right? Make sure the business model is working, hit the goals and sales and operations. But there's some big move the business forward things that we have to do this year if we want to hit our bigger picture mission goals, right? So we get clarity around that, and then quarterly planning is like 90-day sprints. And if you have this response, and this is to everybody listening, not just Chris, if you have this response that goes along with what Chris says, like, but then I want us to be flexible and I want us to move fast. If you're changing direction less, in any increments less than 90 days, I am concerned for you, right? It's just like, whoa, that's a lot of change. So if we can get clear for 90 days and then run really fast together on the in the business and on the business stuff, we can change every 90 days if we really need to make a pivot. But within the 90 days, unless it's, sometimes COVID happens and we all go, that wasn't in our plans, right? And then it's time to pivot right now. So that does happen. But most of the time, in those 90-day increments, we're not going to be making pivots, and then we can get as far as we can, as fast as we can together. And at the end of the 90 days, reassess. Say, okay, we know what we originally thought for the year or for the bigger picture. If we need to make an adjustment, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, what's the next 90-day sprint? So that's my reassurance that you're not going to get tied down too much with your ideas, Chris.
I love it. I'm right there with you. I like that. And 3 months is that's a blink of an eye. That's a snap of the
It
fingers
goes
right
by
there.
so fast.
Most companies, right?
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, Chris, this has been amazing. If people want to learn more about Freedom Healthworks, if they want to connect with you online, how would they do that?
Yeah, website's the easiest way, freedomhealthworks.com. I do a weekly podcast called Healthcare Americana out there. So kind of dive into a lot of those healthcare stories that are below the radar. It's not all doom and gloom out there. It really isn't. There's a lot of people doing some really cool stuff. So we try to highlight those. So if anybody's interested in picking up a second favorite podcast to your own, then give Healthcare Americana a shout out.
All right. I love it. Healthcare Americana. Check that out. Go to freedomhealthworks.com and you can find Christopher Habig out there, I'm sure, on LinkedIn and other places like that. Chris, thank you for being a guest today. It's been great.
I appreciate it, Brett. I appreciate the conversation.
All right, for all of you out there listening, please share, comment, review, like, do all those things to help this episode and all of our episodes get in front of as many seven-figure business owners as possible. We're sharing real stories from real business owners who've learned some really amazing lessons and then bring some awesome challenges for us to talk about on these episodes. Our aim is to help you all achieve the business and the life that you want. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast.